Okay, so what does every tile job have in common? It's not the type of tile, it's not the size of tile, it's not the system you're going over, it's not where you... Okay, so what does every tile job have in common? It's not the type of tile, it's not the size of tile, it's not the system you're going over, it's not where you're installing it, but every single tile job has to have this, and there's actually a minimum amount that it has to have. What am I talking about? Grout lines. Every tile job has to have a grout job. Now if you look at this here, these joints are a 1/16 of an inch. Every grout joint has a 1/16 of an inch space between them. I'm going to tell you about that spacing in a minute. So, how do you determine what grout joint you're going to use? What space you're going to want to have? Is it just something that you pick? Say, I want an 1/8 of an inch grout line, or I want a 1/4 inch grout line, or is there something that determines the size of the grout line? And that's actually the case. The kind of tile and how well the tiles run in size. So if you get a box of tile and you take the tile out, and are all the tiles exactly the same size? Not always. There can be a variation in size. And different types of tile are going to have different kinds of variations. So this tile here, for example, this is a 12 by 24 inch tile. This is a rectified tile. So what that means that all the tiles are pretty much all exactly the same size. It has a square edge. If you look at the tile, let me get a piece of tile here. This is a piece of cut tile. This is a factory edge. Over here, this is a factory edge. You'll see that that is a square edge, perfectly square edge, because these tiles are rectified. They're actually machined so that they're exactly the same size. Okay, so how do you determine what size grout line you use? Well, to start off, every tile job has to have a minimum grout line of 1/16 of an inch. That's the minimum, not a 32nd, not butting them tight, but a 1/16 of an inch. That's the absolute minimum grout line. If you look in the TCNA handbook, you'll actually find it in there. So anyway, so if you've got rectified tile, that's when you can use a 1/16 of an inch grout line, because the tiles run very even. Now another thing you need to know about tiles is tiles have a dye lot, which is the color. They have a gauge, which is the thickness, and they have a caliber, which is the actual size of a tile. So when you're going into a box store and you're picking up a tile, you go in, you say, I like this tile, I need 20 boxes. You go into the shelf and you grab 20 boxes and you put them on your cart and you check out and you go home, and then you start to install them and you find out that the tiles aren't all exactly the same size. And the colors don't match as much as they have. When tiles are shaded, like these ones here, like they're all multiple different shades, there's a lot of different shades, well, it's not quite as obvious. But when they're all exactly the same, the dye lot is going to make a big difference. You can get a tile from two different dye lots, which is exactly the same tile, but they look completely different. So when you go into a box store to pick up your tile, look at all the numbers. Look at the dye lot, look at the caliber, and look at the gauge. Gauge usually isn't a big deal, but the caliber and dye lot can be a really big deal. What does caliber mean? Well, when these tiles are made, They're usually dry powder, they're pressed, and then they shrink. They're fired, and then they shrink. They shrink to a certain size. They're supposed to be a certain size. But what happens is they aren't all exactly the same size. So they're sorted into caliber so that you get a tolerance of how much the size of a tile can vary. If you get like a really cheap tile, you're gonna get out of the same box. You can get a tile which vary as much of an eighth or even like 3/16 of an inch. I've seen them as much as a 1/4 inch difference in size. Believe me, I've seen it out of the same box. So that just goes to the quality of the tile. But anyway, so how do you determine the size of the grout line you're going to use? Well, like I said before, it has to be at least a 1/16 of an inch. And on these rectified tiles, that's what I'm using, a 1/16 of an inch. If you look down here, you can see that to make the job, to make it look good, you have to keep a consistent, even grout line. It has to be straight, and all the grout lines have to be the same size. The tighter the grout line, the more discrepancies in grout size will be noticeable. So if you're not using a rectified tile, so how do you determine the size of the grout line? Well, according to the way it's written in the TCNA handbook, it has to be 3 times the different, at least a 1/16 of an inch, and 3 times the difference in size of a tile. So if you get a bunch of tiles and you find that the tiles vary in size by a 1/16 of an inch. One tile is a 1/16 of an inch bigger, and the other tile is a 1/16 inch smaller, then that means that the grout line should be 3 times the difference in size, so that would mean it should be 3/16 of an inch. So with the really cheap tiles that you get that, vary, greatly in size, and, your grout line is going to have to be wider. So in these, so I did this is all, I'll show you a picture of this. This is another one. I used a 1/16 of an inch grout line on this. I'll show you a picture of this as well. So in these square tiles here, those are also rectified, and it's got a pattern in it. So I was able to use a 1/16 of an inch grout line. But if I had a calibrated tile, then I would have had they weren't very even in size, then I would have probably had to go with a bigger grout line. Typically, when you do a 12 by 12 tile, ceramic tile, and you get the cheap ones, usually you're going to probably end up using at least a 3/16 inch grout line, sometimes even a 1/4 inch. Now, that goes contrary to what most people want. Most people want narrow grout lines. So what happens if you get a really uneven tile and you try and use a narrow grout line? Well, number one, if you're doing them stacked, like a grid or 4, then as you look down the line, you see the grout line going like this. And if you make it wider, that's why they say 3 times, that can make that even out, so it can hide that difference in size. With these tiles, which are very, 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 these grout lines that are very narrow, they're a 1/16 of an inch. They're all exactly the same, so they match up really good. So you can have a narrow grout line. This is what it's going to look like when it's grouted. Over here, I got like a little section. This grouted where the stove goes. So nice and even and beautiful. So the reason I'm doing all this video is because I get a million questions. What size grout size should I have when I install my tile? So that's what you're supposed to do, is go 3 times the different size of the tile. So if you're going to buy a cheap tile, most of the time you're going to end up with a wider grout line. If you buy a better tile, most of the time they're calibrated better so that they run more even, so you can usually do a narrow grout line. If you get a rectified tile like these, then you can do like a 1/16 of an inch. What you don't want to do is butt them together. You never want to butt tiles together, and I'm going to show you why in a second. That is just asking for trouble. On a wall, on a floor, wherever, you just don't butt them together. When you're installing a tile on the floor, I have a video that talks about deflection, and the deflection is how much especially on a plywood floor, the deflection is how much the floor will bend. The joists and also between the joists. So if you want to use it, like, just butt them together. When I say butt them together, I mean put them tight, like that. No grout line. So these are rectified tiles, so you can do a 1/16 of an inch. If these were a tile that was calibrated tile, then you would probably do like a larger grout line. Now the reason why you don't want to butt them tight together is because as you step on the floor will flex. If you've got the tiles butted tight together, say like this here, now they're butted tight together, as you go walk all over the floor and over time, these tiles are going to rub edges like this. The edges are going to be touching each other like that. Like at the top, they'll grind at the very top here. It's hard to show on the camera what I'm talking about. So what happens is, over time, if you have that, you're going to get all the tile edges all going to start to chip and crack, and you get really rough looking tile floor, because as the floor deflects and all the movement that goes along with it, all the edges around the tile start to fall apart. And excuse me. And also what happens if the tile is not exactly the same size, like that, as I said, you're going to get all uneven lines. Well, that's going to be accentuated because there's no way for the tile, the extra size in the tile, to be compensated into the grout line. So it's very important to use the correct size grout line. Now, all that being said, when you're doing a running bond like this here, that you only have to match the two side tiles, like these here, this is a running bond. You can usually, if you know what you're doing and you're careful, you can usually end up going a little bit narrower than you want to be. Typically, when I do a wood look plank tile with tiles that aren't rectified, I typically will do an 1/8 of an inch tile, not an 1/8 of an inch grout line. But before you start setting tile, lay out a few tiles dry, just to see what it's going to look like, so you don't run into trouble. So once you start cementing your tile, down, and you've started, then you have to stay with that grout line, and you can run into a lot of trouble. So always check the size of your tile, see how well they run. If they run very even, then you can use a narrow grout line. If they don't run very even, then you're going to have to use a wider grout line. So don't just buy a tile and say, I'm going to put like a 1/16 of an inch grout line between them, because that, and most of the time, is not going to happen, and you're going to run into trouble, and you're going to get wavy lines, and you're going to get uneven spacing in the tile. So do a little dry layout, lay out some tiles, check to see what the difference in size is, and then determine what your best grout line is going to be. I'm pretty much always using higher quality tile, so I'm always running my tile usually at either an 1/8 or a 1/16. But if you go to get some cheaper tile that, they're cheaper for a reason, then you're probably going to have to do a wider grout line. And like I say, these days most people want narrow grout lines, so choose carefully and wisely what your tile is going to be, and then if you think you have to have like a really narrow grout line because that's what you want and you don't want to see a lot of grout, then you're probably better off buying a better tile. If you don't care about the grout line and if it's wide or not, then you could probably go with a cheaper tile. But in the end, you're gonna get what you pay for as well. So these are really high quality porcelain tile. It's supposed to look like a slate, and they run very, very even. And I'm keeping a very consistent grout line all the way around, and I'm not having any issues at all. So this is the tile that I'm using in the kitchen. That was the tile I was using in the front hall, 24 by 24. This is the tile I'm using in the kitchen, 12 by 24, and this is the backsplash tile. And like I was saying, all these tiles, so you don't always want to check all the numbers, make sure they match, because they have a die lot, a caliber, and a gauge. The numbers on the boxes all have to match. You know, tiles get imported from all different countries: Italy, Spain, Brazil, China, wherever. So it's not always obvious what the numbers are, but they all do have them. For example, this is an Italian tile. We have, I guess this would be the die lot, and that would be the caliber, first choice. I don't know what this other number is. So anyway, if this is your first time seeing my videos, my name's Sal de Blasi. I've been installing tile in the Boston area for over 35 years. If you're looking to find something on how to do something with tile, you go to my channel, you'll probably find it on my channel. I have over 760 videos, everything to do with tile. There are a few things that I haven't covered, but I'm trying to get to those. So leave your comments in the comment section below, and don't forget to subscribe, and don't forget to hit the notification bell, so when every week when I upload a new video, you get notified of my new video. And also check me out on Patreon. If you can support me, that'd be great. But most importantly of all, don't forget to subscribe. And also, I'll leave some links to my, the stuff that I use all the time, to my Amazon store. So if you can support me there, if you need some stuff and you can shop there, that'd be great. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I hope this helped you figure out how to pick your grout line.